Slavery in America was not some abstract sin we can tidy up with footnotes and cartoons. It was a daily terror, a system built on the breaking of human beings until they were stripped of name, lineage, and hope. To be enslaved was to live every waking moment under the threat of violence so casual it was indistinguishable from the weather. A whip split your back for moving too slowly. A lash fell for daring to look a man in the eye. A child was sold away from his mother as easily as a mule, and the screams that followed were drowned out by the auctioneer's call for bids. There is no softening this. There is no clever spin that makes bondage preferable. It was a theft of life day after day for generations. Enslaved men and women were forced into fields before dawn, bending their bodies until their backs were warped, until their hands bled and toughened into knots of scar tissue. They harvested cotton in the heat of Mississippi summers, and rice and swamps and tobacco that clung to their lungs like poison. They were denied shoes and medicine, denied even their own names, whipped for praying, whipped for speaking their mother tongue, whipped for showing the smallest flicker of resistance in their eyes. The women endured an additional hell. They were prey in their own cabins, subject to the whims of these masters. Rape was not an aberration, but an institution, a weapon used to produce more property children born already enslaved. Their fate sealed at birth. Husbands stood powerless. Wives endured silently or fought and suffered worse. Daughters learned too soon that they had no protection. Every intimacy was violated. Every relationship was shadowed by the knowledge that it could be destroyed in an instant by a sales slip or an owner's desire. And yet still they carved out humanity where none was allowed. They sang spirituals in fields and carried codes for escape. They wove African rhythms into new songs that would one day give birth to the blues and gospel and jazz. They whispered stories at night to their children so that memory could outlive the overseer's lash. And they built resistance in the quiet and sometimes in fire and flight, reminding the world that no chain can fully hold the human spirit. There is no pain in this world like the scream of a mother watching her child carried off to the auction block. If you can imagine it, the sun beating down on the courthouse square, men in waistcoats laughing and tallying their bids, and in the middle of it all, a child pulled from the arms that bore them. Small hands reaching, a voice breaking, his mother collapsing as strangers drag away her baby. That child will never see her face again. He will be raised by those who see him as nothing more than labor and profit and property, and she will wake every morning for the rest of her life, still aching for the child she can no longer feed, her soul clawing at a void that can never be filled. And this was not rare. This was not an accident. This was the machinery of American slavery. Families were currency. Husbands were sold away from wives. Children sold away from both. Brothers and sisters scattered to the winds, and the ones left behind were forced to keep working in the fields while their hearts broke in silence. The masters called it business, but the enslaved called it hell. And when someone smugly says that slavery was better than being killed, ask them to answer this: would you tell a mother that her child's sale was preferable to death? Would you look into the eyes of a father who watched his daughter dragged off into the arms of a leering master and say, at least she's alive? What kind of life is that? What kind of man calls that survival? And death is final, but it is honest. And slavery was a slow motion death, a tearing apart of families, of dignity, of soul, spread out over decades. It was the theft of generations. To say that such a fate was somehow a mercy is to speak with the voice of a slaver, not a free man. But we are not numb. So remember the ships where black bodies lay chained in darkness, unable to move, suffocating in the stench of their own survival. Remember the branding irons pressed to flesh, the iron collars that cut into throats, and the runaway notices nailed to courthouse doors as though men and women were livestock. Remember lynching staged as town carnivals, postcards of black men hanging from trees passed around like trophies. Remember Tulsa and Rosewood and Elaine, Arkansas, and the burning of futures that dared to bloom. This is the inheritance of slavery, and no cartoon will ever wash it clean.